So what we're going to do tonight is we have given them the questions ahead of time. We might sneak a few in there that they don't know about just to keep them on their toes. But we want to talk about three main kind of big categories. The first one is maybe something you're all very interested in, and that is how to transition well from college to the real world. And then the second area we're going to talk about is following up with what Mike talked about, which is integrating your Christian faith in the workplace. And then the third area is about work-life balance, how to prioritize, how to make decisions about what you're going to do with your time in terms of work pressure and things that you prioritize in your life. So are you guys ready to go? Okay. We are actually missing one of our panel members, Carrie Smith. If you're in the house, you need to be up here. Come on down. Sorry to put you on the spot, Carrie. It's okay. Okay. And you get to sit right in the middle, too. Oh, boy. Okay, so here we go. Are you guys ready? Okay, our first question is, how would you know... No, sorry, start over. What do you know now that you wish you had known when you were a graduating senior? What do you know now that you wish you had known when you were a graduating senior? In other words, how could you have been better prepared to transition from college to the real world?
I'm holding the mic, so is it on? Can
Yep.
you guys hear me? My name is Grant Barnby. I run a business here in town, a sign business. I've been doing it for almost 30 years. And the question, what do I wish I knew when I graduated? Gosh, that's a hard question, and it's a long time ago, too. I think... I don't know that I was prepared for the gosh, I don't know how to answer this question.
Do you want to pass it on to someone else?
Yeah.
Okay, Eddie.
I always like to answer questions. No. My name is Eddie Colson. I am retired as the superintendent of the College Station School District a year or so ago, and I was a teacher and principal and human resources director and those sorts of things for about 30 years. So I've recently retired and now I have a little consulting firm. So one of the things that I think Mike referred to, and that as I look back on my career, is perspective. You know, how important is work, and how important is your family, and how important is the time that you invest in those. And the perspective I have after spending 31 years in the field of education is that the work is work to make a living, but as Mike talked about, it's so much more than that. You have to look at work as your ministry, not as something that you are required to do. Everyone has to work, and if you take the attitude into your work that this is what God has called me to do, to be here, to be in this place, and to bloom where you're planted, I think your life flourishes much more than if you're resentful from where you are, or you're resentful for the job that you have because it's not the exact one that you wanted, in the exact place that you wanted, with the exact people that you wanted. Then work becomes drudgery. And in order for it not to be that way, you really have to look at, God put me here. Regardless of all the circumstances, I am here. Bloom where you're planted. And if you have that perspective, I think your life, you become just more joyful because you recognize that you're where God puts you, and that is where your ministry is.
That's great. Kim.
My name is Kim Shams. I run a nonprofit ministry in town called Aggieland Pregnancy Outreach. But my real first job was I'm a registered nurse. And right out of school, when I had my first real nursing job, I hit the ICU because I'm really smart and I loved the ICU in school. And I get there and I wanted to show everybody what I knew and how smart I was and how I could do everything. And I felt a lot of pressure to perform and to be as skillful as the veterans, and I wasn't. And after 2 months, my supervisor pulled me aside and very gently told me that I really needed to go somewhere else. And so they transferred me to a step-down unit, which was more my speed. And it was my first real failure in life, but it was a wonderful blessing and helped me in many, in the future. I guess so my bottom line is, when you hit your first job, don't feel like you have to prove to everybody that you know everything, because everybody will know that you're just starting a new part of your education. And if your first job is not a great fit, it's a great educational experience, and realize that sometimes it's a great way to get you to the next place that you really will fit in.
Sure, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Chris Wilkie. I was a computer engineering major, class of 97 here at Texas A&M University, whoop. Started a business with my brother in 1995. I spent 17 years in that business in a variety of roles, where the last 3 years I was the chief technology officer. About 2 years ago, I moved over to a new company in the oil and gas software business, and for the last 2 years there I've served as the vice president of product management. I really commend you guys for being here tonight. I think if I look back in college, I had no clue what I was doing going into the workplace. And I think the biggest piece of advice that I wish I would have had is, I think from 1 Timothy 4:12, which is, you may not have, well, it doesn't say this, but you may not have 20 years of experience architecturally or saving a failing business or running a software, but what you do have is the Word of God. And that is, in your heart, you know what's right. And that verse says, don't let people look down on you because you're young, right? Set an example for the believers in conduct, speech, faith, love, purity. And I made some mistakes going back to pressure in the workplace, where the CEO pulls you aside and tells you to interpret a contract very liberally, which I did, right? I didn't stand up to that CEO. So my recommendation to you is, don't give in to the pressure. Stand your ground for what you know is right, because you don't have the experience, but you can have the ethics that go with that.
That's awesome.
I'm Kelsey, and I graduated here in 2012, and I've been doing finance for ExxonMobil for 3 years now, so fresh out. And I think the biggest thing I would say, I heard all 4 years that I was here that stay in college for the rest of your life. It's the greatest thing ever. Don't graduate. Stay as long as you can. And I wish someone would have told me that that doesn't have to be the best season of my life, and that it was actually going to be a really great season after college, and that God was just as real in my life now and at work as he was here in College Station, where I was surrounded by believers. He's doing a lot in Houston. He's doing a lot in the workplace, and you can be just as much a part of his mission there as you can here, even though here it might seem easier to get plugged into that kind of stuff, and you're surrounded by it constantly. So I wish someone would have told me, you're going to be okay, and that it might be hard, but it's really fun too, and you can do a lot after college that you couldn't do while you were in college. So just be encouraged by that. Your life is not ending the second you walk across that stage. You're going to be fine.
That's awesome. Anybody else, Mike? Okay, Mike, you first, then Grant.
I'm Mike, and I teach. And I wish I had known at the beginning that I would be happier at 59 working than at any point in my life. I wish I'd known that would be the curve. I might have been different.
Awesome.
I was just when I graduated from college, I was a young Christian, and wanted my life to count for the Lord. And I think it would have helped me as a Christian going into the work world if I could have had some teaching on the value of work, and not necessarily just Christianity, but your work is valuable, and it's important to become competent in your work, and you're serving the human community, and that is a place where you will connect with people, unbelievers and believers alike. And I remember that was something that I wish that I think my church, I had been trained in my church, was how to develop, a good work ethic, and so something like that.
That's good. Carrie, you want to add anything?
Sure, I can add briefly. My name is Carrie Smith. I'm a trained physician who is teaching high school science at this point. So just know that God has sometimes very strange ways of getting you where he wants you. But I would totally agree with Mike that I love working now more than I ever did. But I probably never could appreciate how difficult it is to have a family and work and be excellent in both of those endeavors, to be married, be a mom, and now teaching. So it's a challenge and it's difficult, but there are a lot of people available who can support you in that. And so it's possible, but no idea until you have kids and get married that you have all those other responsibilities and how challenging that is.
That's great. That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to get really practical now. We know that most of you here are looking for graduation soon, and so you really want, and you're going to be on the job hunt, so you want some really practical tips on putting together an awesome resume, right? So we're going to ask you guys, what are employers looking for on a resume? So this is like a 4-part question. And what about networking with potential employers? How important is that? How do you do it? How about that interview process? Okay, what are the interviewers looking for, if you have any experience in that area? And then how do you, as a potential employee, evaluate a potential employer or a company? What are some tips that you might give for that? So resume, networking, interviewing, and evaluating companies. Any of those?
This is my favorite one. So if you put Texas A&M on your resume, that's pretty much all you need. It's awesome. I think, when I look at resumes, first of all, I think one practical tip is do spell check. That works. If it's not consistent, it just gets thrown out. So that's one thing. When I'm meeting with somebody, I look for the 5 I's. I stole this from Michael Hyatt. It's integrity, initiative, influence, impact, right? I want somebody that can operate with honor. I want somebody that's going to take initiative. I want somebody that's got insight to solve problems. So that was 2 parts. What's the third and the fourth part?
You did interviewing. So networking with future employees, and then also how do you evaluate companies or places?
Right. I think networking. Today is a digital age for sure. You guys all grew up in the internet age. You can't replace a handshake and walking in and looking somebody face to face and asking a real person for referrals. I think that's the best way to network, is say hello to somebody, get to know them, show interest in them, and then ask them for people that may be able to give you some advice, right? That's a good way to find people. Seeking in a company, I think one of the things that I've learned is people matter, right? You may go to a job that you love, but you spend time with the people. And if you go in and you get a bad vibe on who's running the company and who's in a leadership position, don't go there, right? You want somebody that is committed to the people, to the job, and shows integrity. And even if it's not the flashiest employment opportunity, I would choose that over somebody that you don't want to work with.
That's excellent.
I hope it's not just too obvious, but how you present yourself and how you carry yourself in an interview says so much. If you have tattoos, cover them up. Don't slouch. Look them in the eye, smile. And before you go into an interview, know what your skills are and what you are passionate about. And you don't need to go and be Polly Perky, but have some confidence, even though you're nervous. You know, I am skilled at this. This is something I know that I can do, or that I do very well. That's something that always impacts me when I interview somebody. What doesn't do well for me is somebody says, "I'll do anything." I'm like, no, you won't. I need somebody that's got an interest in the position that I have. And at the same time, when they're interviewing you, like you said, you're interviewing them, and just really pray the Holy Spirit will give you some really insight and wisdom, because it does say a lot when you walk into that office. What's the attitude like? What are people happy there? You know, is this the person who's interviewing you trying to intimidate you? Just run. You know, that's not worth it.
Kelsey, were you going to say something about that one?
Yeah, I can jump in.
Okay.
So I'm real involved in our recruiting, and I think the question we always ask ourselves at the end of a trip is, do we want to work with this person? And that has two faces. That has the side of, do we trust they're going to do good work? And if they're on my team, do I want them on my team? And am I going to want to give my stuff to them? Am I going to want to get stuff from them? And then it's also, is it a good culture fit? And you hear that a lot, and like, what does that really mean? It's tough to define, but you know it when you see it. So I think it's important to know who you are and then know your priorities, because some places are not going to match with those priorities, and some places are going to match a whole lot better. You may not find a perfect fit your first job, and that's okay. Like, that's He's going to refine you in that season too. But figure out what you're looking for in terms of work-life balance, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And ask people questions, you know, like, what do you do here, and what do you like to do? What's your least favorite thing you've done? Because like they've all said, you're interviewing them too. So really, at the end of the day, it comes down to those two things. Do we want to work with you? Like, do we enjoy you? So be yourself. That's the other thing I would say, and I'll end on that. We're not looking for somebody that's trying to fake their way into our doors. We just want someone who's going to do well long term. We want someone who wants to stay, and typically people want to stay when they fit. So just give some thought to who you are and what you're looking for, and go in knowing that so you can ask good questions.
That's awesome. That's great. I really want to encourage you to hang around for the next breakout session. I'll be right in the fellowship hall, and you will be able to ask really specific questions to the 35 working professionals, as Trey mentioned, that are here. So we're going to end the practical session right now and move on to the more faith in the workplace area. But please keep your questions in mind, because these men and women really want to help you out in a practical way tonight. Okay, so moving on. We kind of know that a lot of people may not have a great theology of work. I think Mike did a great job getting us in the door, and as Trey mentioned, this is that Timothy Keller book that's on sale in the foyer afterwards. It's awesome. It is such a wonderful book to help us get that theology. So we want to talk about how you guys have found that you can actually practice your Christian faith in your workplace. How have you been able to do that? What are some of the obstacles to that? So share with us. Eddie?
Thanks. I always think about the fruit of the Spirit. When you talk about whether you're at home or your work, anywhere, you know, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, self-control. Those are things that I think ought to drive us all the time as fruit of the Spirit. But when you think about work, that's what, if you're living your life that way, peaceful, joyful, kind, loving, people are going to come to you as they have issues, as different things at work happen, as different things in their life happens. They're looking for someone that can support them, that can mentor them, that can come alongside them. And people who are overbearing, people who are not authentic and not real, are more of a turnoff than drawing people in. And the way you draw people in is through the fruit of the Spirit. And I think that is one of the primary avenues, because you're not going to probably have a meeting about developing a product where you just say, okay, I'd like to talk to you about my church service yesterday. But you are likely to have a conversation at the end of that meeting where someone says, what did you do yesterday? Or I know you said this. What made you say that? And that opens up that opportunity to have a conversation about what's important to you.
That's great.
I've got, I guess, two stories for how I can live out my work or my faith in the workplace. So I've made a lot of mistakes at work, but I think one is be consistent in the values that God teaches us. I think exactly what you said. It's, the fruit of the Spirit. And, one story for me is our general counsel. This is my previous job. I worked with this gentleman for 6 or 7 years. He sued me. He's a Hindu. So we had some good discussions at work. But in every engagement with that individual over the last 6 or 7 years, I was consistent in how I treated him. He also saw how I treated the people that worked for me and the people that I worked with. Well, it so happens now, 3 years later, he's got a challenge, and now we're in a dialogue of discussion about spiritual relationships. So that's one area where that consistency over 7 years has started to plant a seed in his life. The second thing is, at my current job, we're very international. So I've got a group in the Middle East, Cairo, Tunisia, Bogota, and so a lot of the group is Muslim in the Middle East. But the principle on our team, the first rule number one is treat people like you want to be treated. So as we engage with people, it doesn't matter where they are in the world, these people have kids, their husbands, wives, daughters, brothers, cousins. They have challenges in their family life, and it's how you engage and interact with them over a period of time that you gain their trust to speak truth into their life, right? So I think my encouragement is be consistent.
Awesome. Anybody else?
Yeah. So HR is a thing. And I know, you leave college, and I kind of came in with this idealistic expectation. You'll just go and you'll share Jesus with everybody, and, everything will be great. People don't receive that real well always. So you do kind of have to think about, what does wisdom look like here in sharing my faith and being honoring to God and being courageous, all while respecting my authority and being a good worker. And it really comes down to building relationships. So you've got to be friends with these people, and if God calls you to step out in faith, then by all means you do that. But you've got to build relationships with these people, and you've got to be a good worker. I don't know how else to say that, but I think it's said in Luke that the workers are few, the harvest is plentiful, and it doesn't say the Christians are few. There are Christians in the workplace everywhere, but are there Christians that are willing to show up and work and do well and show up when they say they're going to show up and do the work they say they're going to do? And then the sphere of influence that you have at work is really unique to you. You are the only person with that sphere of influence. And like Mike said earlier, you could be the only person or the last thread or whatever it is. So take that seriously and get to know that person and share your life with them. Be open, and as you live your life honoring God, it will come up. It's impossible for it not to. If you're truly living a life that's honoring to Him, it will come up. So just keep that in mind.
That's awesome. Anybody else want to share?
Just a couple of thoughts, I guess. Where I'm teaching is Brazos Christian School, so I am at a place where I'm surrounded by believers who are also teachers, my administration, but there are students who still may not know Christ there, and so there's that opportunity, of course. And then interactions with people, I think you can really reflect Christ well when you, like Mike, I'm referring back to what Mike's talk, but also when you have conflicts with people, be a person who's seeking peace. When that email comes through and you are on fire because of it, you often need to have conversations face to face and not deal with conflicts via email and stuff. So I think those are simple, practical ways. And I just think that comes up so frequently as conflict. So I think how you handle conflicts, and if you can pursue peace with people, you will draw others to Christ. So.
on the conflict note and that email comes or whatnot, do not react. Always wait the next day before you respond. It comes out a lot better.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
I would just say, similar to what Eddie said about walking in the Spirit, you know, if you're a Christian, then you do have a certain, people see you differently, and if they've worked around you any length of time, they're going to know you're a believer. You're not going to be engaging in some of the activity that people in the world are going to be engaging in, so it's pretty obvious. But
Do you want to add something, Mike?
You know, I think if we love people well, they'll give us access to their lives, and the opportunities to share Christ, that'll come. I remember one student, I used to teach at a small liberal arts school, and I taught some of my students 6 times, 6 different courses. So I got to know them really well over 3 years. And it got to a point where I would write letters to each one of them at graduation, and I would hand them to them outside as we were waiting out on the lawn to march down, of what I'd seen change in their lives over that time that I'd known them. There was one guy, I'm not saying he was the worst student I ever had, but I will say he was a person I consistently tried to counsel to find another major. And this young man, you know, persisted, and he didn't listen to me on it, and he kept just getting by, and course after course was C's, just getting by. And I wrote him a letter at the end of that process. And about 9 months, 8-9 months after he graduated, he contacted me. He said, I want you to know, I got a job. I think it was with Chase or somebody. I got a job. But it had been a long time. He had waited. It had taken him a while to get a job. He said, I want you to know, I've carried your letter in my wallet with me the whole time. And I said, if he believes in me, I can do this. If you do love people where they are, and if you do help them where they are, they'll let you share Jesus. They'll let you share anything you want to share. And so learn to love people well.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, we're going to move on to our last series of questions that talk about balancing life and work. It's the euphemism of the work-life balance. So, you know, we hear when we ask people, how are you doing? A lot of people say, oh, I'm busy, right? Okay, so I want to ask you panelists, can you describe the time demands on your life right now in this current stage, and then compare those to the busy days of college?
I will say up front that I failed this test in terms of work-life balance for much of my career, and honestly I regret it a little bit. It is a challenge, and as busy as you are now, you are going to be busier and busier and busier, and things are going to get more important and more important and more important in your life. And so the original question we started with was about perspective. I think that keeping perspective on work, it is critically important. We've talked about that a lot, that it is a ministry. It is the opportunity to plant seeds and to harvest. It is critically important, but your sanity is important. Your family is important. Your friends are important. And so finding your way through that, there is no easy answer to that. But finding your way through that and recognizing its importance, I think, is something critical for you as you just weigh your options and you think about your career.
Another lesson I've learned is that work doesn't go away. I mean, there's always plenty to do. And the beauty of a real job versus being in college is, in college you've always got papers due or a test coming up, and there's always this anxiety of what's going on. So to me, the beauty of being in the working world was, I felt so free. But now, in my current season of life, I could work 24/7, and there would always be something left on my desk. Mm-hmm. And so the days that I'm not at work, I really have to struggle with not letting my mind go to work on all the things like just 2 nights ago, it was Saturday night. I was having a conversation with my husband. I went down the road of, I need to do da-da-da-da-da-da, and I cut myself off and I said, it can wait. I'm just going to package that up and put it in the compartment, and I'm just going to relax, and I'm going to put my feet up, and I'm going to watch TV all night. And it felt good, but it was hard. But it's a discipline that you have to do to separate yourself from time to time from the things that may press on you.
One piece of advice is, as you get into the work world, find people like the people around me that can help you. I think hearing those words of advice 10 years ago for me would have made a big difference. Perspective is huge. When I compare and contrast being busy in college with being busy now, you are busy now, but the difference I find is your choice of where you are busy is discretionary. You can choose to be in a Bible study. You can choose to go to the Aggie football game. You can choose to go to Midnight Yell. There's a lot of great things at A&M. When you get married and you have a bunch of kids, I don't choose to not feed them or change their diapers or do those things, right? So all that time that you used to have that you were busy with, you're still busy, but you have less true free time, right? When I look at my calendar, I'm like, man, I got 2 hours the next 10 days to do what I want to do. It's awesome, right? So I think when you get out of college, college is great for scripting schedules. It's actually pretty predictable. I go to these classes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, these on Tuesday, Thursday. Here's the benchmarks for the tests that I have to take. I mean, it's hard, but predictable and relatively simple compared to the work world where how do you make money? How do you drive the business? How do you do all these things? What about this screaming boss, the client that's ready to strangle you, right? So you have to learn how to put the discipline of what you're doing now today in the workplace. And this is one thing you can actually bring in. You'll go in the workplace, you're like, what the heck are these people doing? There's no schedule, there's no plan, right? Take what you've got here in college and put it on a calendar. And just like you spend money, you got to spend your time on a calendar before it happens, or else you'll completely lose it.
That's great.
I definitely think I'm busier than I ever was in college, and I would agree with what you said. There's many discretionary issues there. And now it's responsibilities for other people. It's not just a responsibility for me myself getting good grades. It's responsibility for feeding, providing clothing for my family, and keeping the house clean, and then also grading papers, preparing lessons, sitting on a curriculum committee to improve the curriculum, coming here to pour into y'all, and not having to worry about whether it goes on a resume or not. I was thinking about that driving over here today. You have these opportunities where you just don't even have to think. You can just think, I'm just serving, and I don't have to worry that it fits some box to get me a job or an advancement or something. So, but anyways, I still think it's a great time in my life. I'm almost 50, and I love, love, love what I do, and I love being a mom and a wife. And so just that busyness is all good. Take time to rest. Pursue the Lord, and He will give you the time in your day to do what He intends for you to do. And sometimes that means not working, and it means ministering to people. And so I think if you are in tune with Him, in touch with Him, you'll have that discernment, and you'll be able to use your time wisely.
That's excellent. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? We're almost out of time.
I would just briefly say, pursue the people in your life too. Pursue the Lord, and then pursue your wife if you're married. If you're a man, you're married. Pursue her. Keep pursuing her. Even when work's hard, make sure you carve out time to chase her. And I would say date your kids. Have special time set aside on a regular basis for your kids so that even when you miss an event or something happens or you're out of town, you've got that regular time that you two look forward to together, that they know, Daddy's going to be there. And it's easier now because you got technology I didn't have when I was locked in a hotel room in Atlanta and got a 20-minute phone call home on a landline. You can FaceTime, you can be creative, you can play all kinds of things with your kids that can help them survive when you're away. But that would be my idea. Pursue your wife or your husband. Pursue your kids.
That's excellent. Okay, I'm going to open up to the panel for any closing thoughts that you were dying to share that didn't get a chance to share. Anything else you might want to add before we close?
I'll throw in a work-life balance one.
Okay.
I'm coming from a little bit different of a perspective since I am a more recent grad, so I don't have the family priority just yet. So I've learned that there can be this tension between your hobbies and your job. I think a lot of people think that your hobby should be your job, and that may or may not be the case, and either way is okay. But I know for me, some days my job is my priority, and some days my job isn't. You know, it can be more fluid than every day my balance is going to look like this. Like, it can change a little bit, depending on the day and depending on what God has you doing that day. And there can be this tension in the sense that my hobbies have actually enhanced my job and vice versa. And I think that's a really cool thing for me to see, and that God's actually used my job to refine my passions towards my hobbies. And He's used my hobbies and the people outside of work to refine my passions towards the things I do at work and the people at work. So they can be in relationship with each other. It doesn't have to be this perfectly compartmentalized thing where you just do these things outside of work and these things in work. They can bleed a little, and they probably will, but you need to be careful about how they bleed and making sure that you're prioritizing it correctly, because I think we have a tendency to overcomplicate it. And the list earlier said, you know, Christ's righteousness and then other stuff. So if you keep that straight, that balance will be simpler than I think sometimes we make it.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Well, I know we could just listen to the wisdom here for a long time, but we want to be able to move on to our industry breakout session. So I am going to ask you to give a big round of applause of thanks to this panel for being here tonight. And our interns are opening up the doors back there, and so we welcome you to adjourn there. And don't forget about purchasing this book, by the way.